The next pattern that I want to present to you is the queen mate, and the pattern itself doesn't have this exact name, but everybody knows what it is about. It's simply about parking your own queen in front of the opponent's king. The positions that I will show you in this section, and especially with this video, will be way harder than your regular exercises, so I ask you not to despair if you, well, don't find a solution, but still check it and compare your thoughts and learn the methods how to calculate the proper way. So let's start with this position. Here Black simply wins by moving queen to h3, and the idea is pretty simple. We threaten mate with queen g2, and there is just one possible way of white to defend it. Maybe you have seen it, it's queen f1, since that's the only way how white can protect the square on g2. And now you can stop the video and think about a way how Black can still win in this position. So let's see the solution. There are two possible ways to win. First of these as queen takes f1 and then rook c1. Both are, well, starting with checks, so it's easy to find. And this is, well, a back rank mate. The other possibility is to, well, still stick to the queen mate, and for that we can just deflect the queen with rook to e1. And the idea of the sacrifice is pretty easy. White, well, doesn't want to lose the queen since it's also still mate, so he has to take, and then we simply set a mate. With doing such sacrifices, you also need to keep in mind that white can also play and has active moves. So for example, if you start with checks, then there's nothing white can do. But if you, for example, would not have this rook on e7 and would consider to sacrifice the other rook with the same reasoning, well, this doesn't work at all, because white has also some checks on his own and will, well, change the result of the game. So these are, well, the major points how to, well, try to mate with the queen. And let's show it on another example. This, let's assume, is a real played game. You are white and you have to move. And how would you play in this position? Just stop the video and think about it. Now, if you have decided just taking the pawn and being happy, this is a decent move, but certainly not the best one in this position. Since, as you might have guessed, it is a puzzle and there is a concrete forced way how white can win here. And to find such solutions in real games or just in puzzles, you always need to check the active moves. So let's start with the checks. This is a check, this is a check, and this is a check. There are no other checks left. So is there anything that we can benefit from playing rook to e8? Black takes with the queen, and the answer is no continuation. Same with knight to e7. So knight to e7 check. Black might take with the rook or with the knight. Well, the rook is better, but there's nothing that we really gain from it, or some new ideas or patterns that we can use. So we give it away. Then there is knight to h6, and this move doesn't have to be necessarily bad. It just doesn't provide us with anything. It's more like the first variation that you have to check is, well, you give the check, and black doesn't have to take, but if he takes, then the only interesting move here is queen takes f6, but then black might not take, but this is the very first guess and estimation that we have about the resulting position. And now, after this continuation, the question is, was it worth it, and do we have any advantage? And the answer is not really, because we have a better pawn structure, yes, but there are still two connected passed pawns, and we haven't gained anything, especially if the alternative is just to winning a pawn. So this move might become interesting, but it's not our priority right now. So let's continue with the captures, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 captures. And rook takes b5 is the one that you should have spotted right away, because that's the obvious choice. Knight takes g7 might become interesting if we can win the knight, for example, but we cannot, because knight takes g7, king takes g7, knight is protected, we haven't done anything. And thinking about sacrificing the queen, so let's see, taking on g6, he takes back. Is there any new ideas that we have gained from it? Answer is no. And same with taking on f6, he can take with the pawn, and there is no continuation why we should have removed this knight. So there's only one last move left to prove, and this is rook takes f6. And we need to briefly check, is there any ideas behind this sacrifice? And the answer is, well, what might black do? He could play g takes f6, but if he does so, we have some interesting ideas with queen to h6. Certainly this is worthy of a calculation. And the second option is queen takes f6, but then we might continue with rook e8, and there might be something possible. So in the end, that doesn't mean that rook f6 wins the game straight away. It just means the move isn't as bad as it seems in the first moment. And then, well, you have two interesting options, and then you need to calculate and compare them to each other. Rook takes b5, there's nothing to, well, calculate in this position. You simply won a pawn, but at the same time you don't have a big advantage, because black has a knight and a pawn for the rook. So it's a small advantage for white, but it's not a clear-cut win. So let's compare it to the other option, rook takes f6. If you are really strong of a player, then you might have solved the position already from the beginning to the end. In that case, I would actually advise you to skip to the fourth section or even to the sixth part. If not, then I'll give you, and I assume that most of you as beginners couldn't have solved this exercise by any chance, that we start with this position, and I'll give you some time to, well, find a solution. So let's solve it. If it's white to move, then there is only one move to check, and this is queen to h6, since that threatens a mate, and this is a terrible threat that black has to react to. And black can only play queen to f8, since this is the only move that defends it. And then, if you have remembered the last example, we can sacrifice our rook to deflect the queen and mate the king. That's it. So this is the solution for pawn takes f6. There is a second move, and this is queen takes f6. If you would have been a professional chess player and would have played this game over the board, then you would need to have imagined this position 2 moves ahead, and still be confident or stubborn enough to calculate the variation further, since that is certainly a check, but black isn't mated yet. So in the end, you just simply gave up in exchange for now. So what most of you would have probably done, and this is something that the regular chess player does, but also the reason why learning of these active moves are such important, is that you would try intuitively to guess whether this position is worth it or not. And in the very first moment, there is nothing else in this position that is viable to play, continue. And then you would start again with this position. And you would say, well, I've just queen takes, knight f8, doesn't give me anything, so I just take on b5 and continue with my game. This is how most of the chess players think, and this is also the reason why most of the chess players cannot properly calculate variations, because this is the technique that you have to use to be able, to see this all these tactics. Well, if you are here, you need to stubbornly calculate all the active moves until the end. So this is your position, you're white, and instead of saying, well, I'm done, it's lost, you should check whether there are options left that you can proceed with. And if we start with checks, these are the checks that are possible in this position. And you need to check all of them. So queen take g7 is a bit, too much, since black just takes and there is nothing else that's left. Then it's really done. So we can just move it away. So knight to e7 check is an interesting one, because it has an idea. If the king moves away, we can take the knight and win the game. Is knight e7 winning right now? The answer is no. Since black can take on e7, and then that's it. We certainly do have some benefit from, so for example, he has to take with the rook. Then we might take the queen and say, well, after capturing, we can take the rook and we might have an advantage in material. But in both cases, even with rook takes e8, it's not that white has a material advantage. He certainly did win something, but in this position he isn't up in material in this position. So knight to e7 is not a bad move, but it doesn't work. And finally, the last move is knight to h6. Again, if the king moves away, we take the knight and its mate, meaning that black has to take with the queen, and this is the final test. Do we have anything else that we can show in this position to, so we can justify all the the sacrifices that we made so far? And the final answer is actually yes, because there is another check, the only one, there are two checks, rook takes f8 and queen takes h7, but this one is the very final check that we need to check for, and this results in a mate. So this is the whole exercise, admittedly way above your strength level, but this is the whole solution from the start. You take the knight, black takes, you give a check, black moves in between, you give another check, black has to take, you give final check, and then it's made. The task itself is, as said, way too much for you to solve, but that might give you, a goal to strive to. This is something that you might solve at, I guess, 1700 Elo. So let's go to the final position. It's this one, and I'll explain you a bit about this game. This is a training game between me with white and a student of mine with black, and he did completely crush me in this position, starting from here. Your goal is to, well, start with this position and do your best in calculating. Now, the solution. Always, in every single game, you need to check for active moves. So, are there any active moves for black? And the answer is yes. Checks, there are none. Captures, well, here, here, and here. You just need to spot them first, and then we can continue. Is queen takes c5 a good idea? Well, no, because white can take with the knight. That's it. Pawn takes e4. That's interesting. Let's check it. So if you take on e4, then the first reaction that you have to be prepared for what happens if white takes with the queen. But here there's a simple solution. We just win the knight, and we are obviously happy with this continuation. Being a knight up is certainly a win technically, so we don't need to check the alternatives, whether there's even something better, because a win is already a win. Instead, white should have to realize that the pawn cannot be taken right here, so instead he will probably move the knight away, so knight to d2 maybe. Maybe also rook takes d8 and knight to e1 in case, but this is something that we have to start with. Now the pawn is again attacked. It isn't certain whether we can defend it, so we might lose it back anyway. But it is something like of a start of variation. It might win us a pawn, but we are not certain yet, and the position is not clear. That is the rough estimation with pawn takes e4. Then there is the final move, rook takes e3, and if you just did not consider this move at all, simply by the reasoning of, well, I lose an exchange, why should I do it, then you are on the wrong path. Since rook takes e3 is actually the winning continuation. The idea is, obviously white has to take on e3, and continuing here you need to show something that is worth an exchange. You might start with queen to g5 check, but white just moves his king away, and then there is nothing else that, well, that you can show with black. Instead, you need to see all the active moves, and some of them are also, well, one of them is bishop to h3. This is something that is known as a pattern, so the more chess you learn, the more of such patterns you will see, and then it's easier to spot these in your own games. But all of these patterns have in common that they start with active moves, so it doesn't matter whether you know them or not. If you calculate all the active moves in a proper manner, then you will, well, get them anyway. It's just how easy and intuitively clear is it for you to sacrifice the rook without thinking compared to, well, you need to find it all by yourself. It might be also a time issue depending on how much time you have for a game. So for example, if you're just a blitz player, then obviously you won't have the time to calculate it properly, whereas if you're an experienced player, then you can evaluate it in 3 seconds and say that is certainly worth it, I'm really, really sure. But we are here to learn chess and not to, well, explain the moves. So bishop to h3 has a certain threat, and the threat is to set up a mate with queen g5 and queen g2. For example, if the rook moves away, then there is the mate. So in this position, white has only one possibility to, well, save the king, and it's to move it to h1. With the idea on queen g5, white plays rook to g1. Now, since king h1 is actually forced, you can already argue that black in the worst case could actually take just the exchange back with bishop takes f1, and then we are just happy with the position. Or we might also think about whether we can win the game. And in that case, this is also one of the rules that you see in this position. This bishop, in case you have a winning attack, is stronger than a rook, since you don't want to exchange the bishop for a rook, because your bishop has a more important role than simply, well, the value of the rook that it's capturing. I'll make a pause right here and let you think about the position again. So the solution for black is to play queen to f7. And how you can spot these moves? Well, it's pretty simple, since it's one of the threats that black can do. Well, capturing a pawn, especially with the threat of a mate, is a threat. So there's this capture, there are no checks, and this is a capture, this is a capture. Obviously they have no much meaning in this position, the last two. And finally, all that's left is what can you possibly attack, and maybe b5, attacking the queen, but doesn't do us any benefit, especially since white just can take the pawns. Or you can attack this unprotected pawns, and then you can find queen to f7. Queen to f7 is a bit more precise than queen f6, just for possible checks on this diagonal. For example, later with queen c4 check. But this is just, well, some nuances. Now it's white to move, and white could actually play two different moves, and I would ask you, what is the move that, well, you would consider the best in this position? Well, the answer is rook d3 is a terrible move, simply because we can win the rook that's unprotected on f1. And now we are a piece up, and at the same time the position is still clear winning. Though I will give you a bonus task in exactly this position. Simply, again, stop the video and think about the position. So the solution is bishop to b5. That is just trapping white's queen. This is a move that you usually will just not spot at all, because all your focus is more on, well, how to exchange pieces or how to mate the king. Actually, knight to g6 is a better move that I just found, so both of these moves are quite, well, winning. And both of them you will spot only if you check the active moves. But bishop b5 is also just an interesting option that you can see if you start to checking for active moves. Well, let's go back and play the better defense, and this is the move knight to d2. And again, I'll ask you to stop the video and think about a solution. Now, the solution in this position, there are many moves that you can check, but essentially the best continuation is just to take on e4. And the idea of this move is not of winning a pawn, since that is not the real threat, but the real threat is to win this knight. Since, well, for example, if white takes with the pawn on e4, you just capture second knight, and after rook takes d1, you just set the mate. You could also win the rook if you're happy, but it's worth less than the mate. So this is the idea that black had in mind with capturing on e4. At the same time, the knight cannot capture because queen takes the 3, and so white in this position has to take with the queen. And now you will have the very last exercise to this position. It's black to move. So the solution is you simply take on f1 and you win the game, since if rook takes f1, then rook takes d2, win the game. And if knight takes, then well, you have won the rook. And that's it. I gave up with white, and this is the whole game. If you would ask me how much of all of this have my student seen, I would guess starting from here he was already sure that he was winning, and all of the moves are quite, well, reasonably. He had an Elo of 2000, so a bit stronger than you are, and this is the level that I hope to be able to provide for all of you. But if you ask what do I need to become stronger and what is the level that I have to reach, so this is a level of calculation that you should be able to, well, get in your own blitz games.